Wow, thank you guys. That's pretty awesome. Well, as you said, it's really great to be back here in Wisconsin. This is home for me. I grew up just a couple of hours drive away from here, so it's really fun to come back after having worked on the West Coast for so many years and come back and see all this amazing stuff happening right here at home. I want to give you a little bit of a story today and tell you kind of the history of Tesla. How did we get started? Where did it come from? And where's it going also? Maybe tell you a little bit about some of the cool new products that keep me so excited and that we're working toward in the future. And it's also neat because events like this remind me so much of the beginning of Tesla. Today we're often at different conferences or we're at industry events and things like that, but this is really how it was getting started. And it's really awesome to see that this is still happening. There's still this amount of grassroots passion for sustainability, renewable energy, and everything associated with it, electric vehicles, all of it. At this point, it's moved more into mainstream, which was, that's absolutely our goal. But we're absolutely an underdog. These technologies are still in the sort of 1% or 0.1% of the overall market. So even though some things seem like mainstream today, there's still a massive need for this kind of grassroots movement to come forward and galvanize support for this. So let me maybe dive into a couple of slides here and help tell the story. And I'll save a little bit of time at the end for some questions and hopefully get to hear from you guys and what you would want to talk about. Now, many of us probably know all this all too well, but the fossil fuel industry overall actually provided a lot of benefit to humankind. Sometimes I think it gets demonized completely, but we sort of forget that everything we built today is built on the history of that. And we need to find ways, in my view, to transition in a way that doesn't reboot everything we've built today. The real challenge is how do we find a way to keep up the same kind of prosperity and the same technologies and all the things that have lifted people out of poverty and provided so much benefit to humanity, but do that in a way that doesn't create the pollution, the destruction of the environment. And there's of course local pollution, air quality issues in cities and in whole countries that are a big issue with coal and other types of fossil fuel, but perhaps one of the most difficult pollution points is carbon dioxide. This is a global pollutant. It mixes across the entire atmosphere, and it's just pervasive. Anytime you burn fossil fuels, you create carbon dioxide. They go hand in hand. So this is an interesting graph. You've probably seen many of these types of graphs, but this is a graph that shows the concentration of carbon dioxide in the Earth's atmosphere over just the last few years. And when you zoom into this time scale, you can see the kind of annual cycle from summer to winter, as trees grow and absorb the CO2 and then die and give it off in the northern hemisphere. But it's a steady increase. And something interesting about this graph is that for the first time last year, we crossed 400 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. It's the first time that's happened in perhaps over 1 million years. And it's also kind of sobering to realize that we're not going back below that. We don't even know how to go back below that, even if we wanted to try really, really hard. Even if we stopped burning fossil fuels today, this curve would have an arc to it and would still level above 400 parts per million for many, many decades, maybe centuries. So it's kind of sobering to me to think that we've done something measurable to the entire atmosphere that all of us are breathing and we're living in that we can't really undo. Sometimes when you spill something, you can just clean it up and it doesn't seem like that big a deal, but this is going to be an issue that will be with us for decades and centuries to come. And it's part of why I think it's such an interesting problem as an engineer to work on. It's going to be relevant for generations. And if you back up a little bit more, this is that same graph, just zoomed out to maybe a few hundred years. And this is where, to me, it becomes so crystal clear, that this is something that humanity is doing. This is largely driven by burning fossil fuels. I doubt that's a controversial point in this audience. But a lot of people still, amazingly, a large number of people still don't think that we could have that effect on the atmosphere. They just think it's infinite and we can't directly affect it. And of course, in addition to the carbon dioxide, temperature is the secondary effect of this. And I think this is a cool way to sort of graphically look at what temperature has done over the last 150 or so years in this animation that spirals outward as the temperatures are increasing. And you can really start to see the effect as this grows into the last few decades and all the way into last year. this is incredibly persuasive data in my view. There's really no other way to look at this other than a quite serious problem we have to fix. And maybe one anecdote to think about the atmosphere for me is that the atmosphere seems like a huge thing. You look up in the sky, it looks like it goes on forever. You imagine it going for thousands of miles into space, but it's actually incredibly thin. And when you look at the Earth from space, this is a real picture of the Earth from space, you can get a sense of just how thin that is. More than 90% of the atmosphere is below 10 miles above us. So if you could get in a car and just drive straight up, you would drive almost completely out of the atmosphere in about 10 minutes, going 60 miles an hour. And that's kind of an amazing thing. It's just that we live in 2 dimensions, more or less, so we never get to experience how small the atmosphere actually is. So whenever we're putting pollution into the atmosphere, we're putting it into this very, very thin layer that doesn't have as much capability to absorb that as it might seem when you just intuitively look out at the sky. Now, I want to change gears a little bit and kind of reverse back in time for me and go back to when I was a kid and when I was starting to think about these same types of problems. And for me, I've always been fascinated by sustainable technology. I don't know exactly what it is about that, but even since, before I was in high school, I was really interested in how to solve problems in a sustainable way. And, for me, this was way before electric vehicles or anything on the market, and these were just kind of fun projects. But I think it's an interesting time to some of the things that people are doing, still here today with different types of technologies, trying to get them off the ground. But, these were things I was doing as a kid, building electric bicycles, building electric golf carts, and trying to make electronics work to make batteries more efficient and all this sort of thing. And even in college, I stuck with that passion and got into solar car racing, which is still a sport that is growing and pretty successful among a number of different universities. Solar car racing has actually been a phenomenal place for us to recruit employees. And we have a lot of employees at Tesla that were ex-leaders of solar car teams or founders of those teams or team members. And actually, some of the people in these pictures that I raced with, 20 years ago, were still at Tesla, and the people we've hired into leadership roles. So, these type of education programs, and I know some of you here are educators, are so important. To get students engaged in this stuff and get them inspired by it at an early age. It's something that we really want to promote. I want to promote. Is critical to the industry. Because as a sidebar, one of the things we've found that's the most difficult challenges to scaling up manufacturing and engineering and just building more and more products has been talent. Ironically, there actually a scarcity of people, if you look across the country and across the world, who have deep expertise in these type of technologies and have followed that training all the way through their schooling. So starting people off early is really critical. In college, I also did conversion electric cars. And this was an electric Porsche I built when I was going to undergrad, and this was kind of the field of electric vehicles in the early 2000s. This was a garage industry. You couldn't go to General Motors or Toyota or anyone else and buy an electric car. You barely still can today, but in that time frame there was absolutely nothing. So it was definitely a garage industry. People would buy the components online, they'd convert a car in their garage and piece the whole thing together and make something that somewhat worked. It kind of reminded me of the homebrew computing club, before computers were actually cool. And before computers really had any practical use. This was people building these type of cars that didn't have that much practical use. This car had about a 25-mile range, but it was really fast. This was an interesting demonstration in being able to go really quickly. And it actually won a couple of world EV racing records for the time. That weren't very competitive with gasoline back then, but for me it was also an interesting learning exercise that batteries and energy storage and range were the biggest problems. Electric vehicles could be made pretty fast, motors were really quite good, the electronics were getting really much better, but batteries were still terrible. And even this conversion car that I built back in college, this used lead-acid batteries. And those are the same type of batteries that still many people use in off-grid solar installations or in mobile homes or other types of things. And even the major car makers were using lead-acid batteries just not even 10 years ago for their electric vehicles. But for me, this was the beginning of trying to figure out how do we do something better. And when Tesla was getting started, even slightly before Tesla was getting Keynote started, lithium-ion batteries were kind of the next best thing in technology for energy storage. They were just getting commercialized on laptops and cell phones. And I started taking these apart, testing them, trying to learn everything I could about lithium-ion batteries. And trying to figure out how could I apply these batteries back into sort of homebrew cars or sort of university car projects to make them go faster and go farther. And in my sort of quest to do all that, I went looking for pretty much anybody that would listen to me, that would be excited about these kind of things, that would share this passion, would invest money at the time, and also help get this going. And I ran into a guy who was not anywhere near as famous as he is today, but he was still quite famous, having built PayPal, and he was just getting started in SpaceX. And of course, that's Elon Musk. And Elon was the first person I ever met that immediately understood the vision for what I was hoping could be done, and several other people that came together in the beginning of Tesla. And he immediately understood it. He was immediately excited about it, and just said, "Oh, well, this is obvious. We have to go and we have to build a car company to make tons of these things." And I was like, "Okay, well, I was thinking more of like, let's build maybe a couple and see how it works real fast." But he jumped in immediately, and he put his money where his mouth was, and we all got together along with about 3 other co-founders of Tesla and launched the company back in 2003. So it's kind of amazing how short of a period of time that was. It's not that long ago, and to see how much has been able to change in that time frame is it's amazing even to me. This is beyond even what I think we could have hoped would happen. And the mission that bound us together was basically the same then as it is still today, which is accelerating the world's transition to sustainable energy. That is what we cared about. That is what I wanted to spend my time working on. This is pretty cool talking to an audience that gets this so deep. I have to say, that's not the norm. But, this was what we cared about. And, the odds of failure when we were starting the company were way higher than the odds of success. I mean, maybe it was like 20 to 1, 50 to 1 that we were just likely going to fail. But, this is so important, and it was something that, we felt was worth failing. And even if we worked at it for 2, 10, even more years and still failed, we would have been cool with that. Because, this was something that needed to be done. And frankly, benefits the world, and even if we couldn't, build it into what we hoped, wouldn't matter. And Elon felt the same way, and he put money into this and started working on it with us before anyone else would even think about it. This was before clean tech was even a term in the investing world, and there were no other really energy startups. It was in the midst of the .com bubble where everyone was doing software or something. And the electric vehicle space at the time had also really struggled. There were many other startups. Some of them were actually really great teams. I met and still know some of the founders and engineers from these companies, but they really struggled to get into the mainstream. They struggled to be taken seriously by customers that probably weren't in this tent, and that was a big challenge, and by also investors, frankly. And it was kind of a deep stigma that electric vehicles were golf carts. Everyone you talk to sort of immediately thought, oh, geez, electric vehicle, well, that must be low power, short range, kind of maybe ugly, and it was a bad stereotype. So we immediately set out to create a product that would change that stereotype, and we kind of went at it from completely the other direction. We said, what is the best that the technology can possibly do? We didn't sort of say, what can we build with the sort of funds we have or anything like that. We just kind of took a clean sheet of paper and said, here are the batteries, here are the motors and electronics we have at our disposal. What's the best we can possibly build? And that's where the Tesla Roadster came from. I saw a few Roadsters parked out here, a few owners are here, somebody. And this was a phenomenal exercise in changing perceptions, because it immediately started to shift the idea that electric vehicles actually were more about high performance, and they were more about torque and quick acceleration and responsiveness. And this car was the very first lithium-ion powered car. So we took those early ideas of lithium-ion, we packaged them together into, at the time was a huge battery pack. And this was about a 52 kilowatt hour battery pack when we first built it. which was, again, unheard of. It was maybe 3 or 4 times bigger than most other companies had ever tried, and no one had ever tried lithium-ion. Everyone was very quick to tell us this was an extremely bad idea. These batteries were better known for catching on fire in laptop computers and causing all kinds of other problems. So it was a pretty thorny engineering challenge to figure out how could we string together several thousand, about 6,831 lithium-ion laptop batteries. I will never forget that number. Laptop batteries, more or less, in this car, and figure out how to make it very safe, robust, something that would last 10 years instead of maybe 2 or 3 in your computer. So this was the fun challenge, and we had a really blast at doing this. And hindsight's more rosy, but it was really a fun time. And working with some of the best engineers I could ever imagine, and trying to solve these problems. And it was kind of under the radar for several years. This was back in about 2004, and it wasn't until 2006 that we actually unveiled this car to the public and had what we felt was a huge event at the time. It was smaller than this, actually, but it felt like a really huge event. We invited in all the celebrities we could possibly convince to come there. We had Arnold Schwarzenegger to come and visit, and a few other folks. He was a bigger celebrity then. And this was also a cool thing because we started taking orders for the car for the first time. And before this, we never actually sold any cars. In fact, we had no salespeople at all. We were all engineers at the company, more or less. And we really had no idea how to sell this thing, or even if it would sell, frankly, but we felt it probably would. And so we literally just started an Excel spreadsheet taking orders and said, well, maybe if anybody gives us $100,000, they can get an order. So this was pretty crude, and it wasn't very well thought out. We actually didn't even know what the car would cost to build at the time, which became a problem later. But this was actually a really interesting exercise because way more people than we thought signed up for this. That in the same event, we had maybe a few hundred people at this event, and we were giving test rides for the first time, which was also really a crazy experience because we only had 2 prototype cars that were just barely working. But we could give test drives, and while they were working, they were phenomenal. And people were blown away. We could demonstrate 0 to 60 out on a little runway at the Santa Monica airport, and people were floored by it. So we started getting these reservations, and 10 people, 20 people, 30 people gave us $100,000 at this event. So that was pretty sobering to this group of maybe 50 or so engineers at the time who were doing this and thinking, geez, this is millions of dollars. This is kind of a crazy vote of confidence. And even after that, then the media started picking up on this story more than we ever expected. And they started writing stories about this kind of crazy activity and these wacky Silicon Valley people trying to start a car company. And even more orders poured in. We had 100, 200, 300, and it grew to 800 orders before we even actually began delivering cars. So that was a really amazing exercise in building this group of incredibly loyal, devoted customers that actually helped support the company through the building of the cars, because they were able to help provide the funding for buying the parts ahead of time, for getting the production set up, so that we could ultimately build them their cars. And that was a pattern that we've somewhat repeated with some of the details were fine, but it sort of showed the world that actually this was something we could do. There was enough excitement and interest out there to do this. And we ultimately delivered a few thousand Roadsters, around 2,500, which was a lot, more than actually any other electric vehicles that had been delivered at the time. But in parallel with that, while we were building and delivering those Roadsters, we were also doing something else, which was starting on a brand new car. And this car became the Model S. And that's probably the car that most people think of with Tesla today. I mean, it's the car you see out there for the most part. This was a really interesting exercise because we had never built a car before, frankly. The Roadster was kind of a conversion in some ways. We took a Lotus Elise and built the entire powertrain. We built a battery, a motor, all the electronics and software, but the car itself, we didn't build very much of. And with the Model S, we said we're going to build all of it. We're going to start from truly scratch, no carryover components from any other thing. It's not a converted gasoline car. And the whole world was really telling us this was crazy, and that building a brand new car is something that takes even big car companies hundreds of millions of dollars and many years to pull off. But we sort of charged into it. Elon was particularly fearless and sort of launched us in this direction. And it turns out in hindsight that actually, having never done this before, was probably one of our most valuable weapons. Because really seriously it was. And we were able to take risks and do things that no other car company ever would have considered doing. Just because they wouldn't have thought it would be accepted by the market, or it was too big of a technology lift in one generation. We were, basically betting on success in many different pieces of development and testing. And we were really very scrappy doing this. I mean, we designed that car in a tent. This was our design studio, which was actually a tent, probably about the same size as this one, maybe smaller. Trying to do the clay modeling and the industrial design of what that car would become. And we had this vision of making something that was, this utilitarian, sporty, luxury, kind of this great combination that would appeal to what we felt was the real sweet spot of electric vehicle ownership. And, you guys know the story, but, the Model S has become, I think, perhaps the most successful luxury EV, not just EV, but luxury sedan of any kind on the planet. And it's phenomenal that happened so fast. What's so cool to me is that this was done with completely different technology. The physics and the chemistry that moved that car, and the car's parked just right out there, is really radically different. On the outside, it kind of looks like a regular car with 4 wheels and seats and all the other stuff. But when you start peeling the onion, it's a totally different thing inside. And the fact that, only a few years after starting production and going into this, we're able to have so many superlatives. This is now the quickest production car on the planet, and it's electric. That is pretty amazing, and it's top-of-the-line configuration. We have over 300 miles of range, which nobody thought was possible a few years ago. And also, most of the cars we're selling are all-wheel drive. So it's really able to hit on kind of every major metric that people are excited about in terms of just vehicles overall. And I think that was also key to what we did a little differently. And we deeply believe in sustainability. That is our mission. But when it came to sort of setting a benchmark for ourselves, the benchmark were the best internal combustion cars. And we leased BMWs, or we rented BMWs and Mercedes and Porsches, and those were the cars that we were test driving, trying to understand, what is it we have to beat. We didn't go out and sort of get an old EV1 or EV Plus or something and try and beat that. We really wanted to break into the mainstream market and let electric technology compete head-to-head with everything else. And I think that's what we have done pretty successfully. And on that same platform, we've also built the Model X. This is a sport utility vehicle. This is basically using the same battery, the same motor technology as the Model S. And along with all the technology that went into the cars, there was one other thing that we started to do at this point in time, which was pretty interesting also. And, the Roadster was great as a car. It met a lot of people's needs, but the one thing you could not do with the Roadster very efficiently was take a long trip. You couldn't take a road trip. And that's sort of a bummer because one of the big reasons people buy cars, especially in the US, is the sense of freedom and being totally untethered. You can hop in your car and drive across the state or across the country. Even if you don't do it very often or ever, some people still will do it, and the idea that you could is really important. So we really thought about how can we solve this idea of the road trip, the long drive. So we actually, when we were pioneering the Model S, we invented this thing we call the supercharger. And this kind of started the company in a very different direction, which was thinking about the infrastructure around the car and the energy sources that power the car. Because it's all connected. You can't just build an electric car and then sort of treat that as an isolated product when there isn't a good infrastructure to power it. The best analogy I can think of is a cell phone. You could make a really awesome cell phone, like the best iPhone ever, but if you put it into a network that was terrible, or you didn't have connectivity, beyond 100 miles from your house, it wouldn't be very useful. You really couldn't use that thing as much, and it frankly just wouldn't take off. So we invested a ton in this. This is a DC charging network. It charges at very high speed directly into the battery. And we've been working on this for several years, but today, the whole country is pretty much covered with this charging station network. You can drive coast to coast, up and down the eastern and western seaboard, or through the middle of the country, using only these charging stations. And Tesla just decided to jump in and do this ourselves. We looked at who we could partner with, whether we could work with different governments or state agencies, but all of it was taking way too long. And the pace the products were moving and the pace that we needed to grow this and still grow it really only let us do it ourselves. So we started jumping in, sending, I literally had a team of interns that I would send out along the freeways, and they'd go and stop at the rest stops and try and figure out which Denny's or Arby's or McDonald's would be the best place to put a supercharger station. And then we would lease the land, we'd set up the electric meter, and we'd build this little station. And these things were actually not as expensive as most people thought. There were these government studies that said we'd have to spend billions of dollars to build these type of networks, but when we did it in a really tactical, efficient, scrappy way, we could get things like this done for much less than anybody expected. Today we open one of these stations somewhere in the world, roughly every around 12 hours. It's pretty amazing when you kind of think about this thing. And maybe just to bring that full circle into looking at how much internal combustion, or how many internal combustion vehicles we're actually displacing, and how this market has shifted in a few years. These are some sales statistics from Straubel. This is Q3 of last year. Sorry, it's not more recent, but this shows kind of the Model S stacked up against the BMW 7 Series, Mercedes S-Class, CLS. These are brands that have been around for decades. The S-Class was kind of the quintessential luxury sedan. That's it's on generation like 10. I don't even know what it is. So to have another vehicle from an unknown manufacturer with new technology come in and do this was just unprecedented. But to me, what it points at, even if you wipe away all the brand names and everything else, we just said there's an electric one that's better than all the other ones. It really points to the fact that the electric technology must be quite a bit better. This isn't something that we could support just on brand power or anything else like that. The technology is actually better. The car is better, and it's better for what customers want to do. And that's really cool. To me, that's kind of the thesis behind Tesla, which is use technology to make better products so that people make sustainable decisions and just do it naturally. They don't have to feel like they're doing something that's being forced upon them or sacrificing. It's just better, and it just grows organically. So this is, I'm really proud of this, and it's pretty great results. But we're not stopping there. The whole world has something close to 2 billion cars now, which is just a staggering number of automobiles on the entire planet. And there's about 100 million new cars sold every single year. So the fleet turns over roughly every 15 or 20 years, despite the growth of the fleet. Think of it that way. So 100 million new cars per year. That's a really massive number. And with Model S and X, doing everything we can, growing as fast as we can, we're still selling in the order of 100,000 units a year. So that feels great. That's unprecedented for electric vehicles. But 100,000, is a tiny percentage of 100 million. We're not even to the decimal point yet. We're sort of approaching 0.1% of the overall market for new cars. And to actually have an impact, to meaningfully reduce CO2, we have to find a way to get more cars to more people. So most of our work has been on reducing the cost and increasing the volume of the cars we build. Many people tend to think of Tesla as just a luxury or performance brand, and they kind of put us in that category forever. But that isn't the mission statement. That's not what we're actually trying to do. That's a pathway to maturing the technology and to reducing the cost by building cars that we can sell and make money on. But the Model 3 is what we've been working on for quite a few years. And the Model 3 is the next vehicle platform that is able to reduce the cost massively. So the entry price of the Model 3, which probably most people know, is $35,000. It's about half the base price of the Model S. And it's interesting that if you look across these kind of 3 product generations, each time we've come close to cutting the base price of the car in half. There's not too many technologies where each product generation things are doubling or improving by a factor of 2x. This is a really exciting time for electric vehicles and all the technologies behind them, but for renewable energy in general. This is kind of the hockey stick, the bottom Model 3 was a phenomenal market success, and we launched this car last year, and in only about 2 weeks of having reservations open, kind of thinking back to what we did with Roadster, in 2 weeks here we had over 400,000 orders. And again, we actually had little pools inside the company. We were betting on what would happen. Nobody really knew, which is kind of the crazy thing, but there's basically no way to know this. And the numbers really surprised all of us. There were several factors more than I think most of us thought we could do in this short of a time frame. And again, it proved to the whole world that there's a massive demand for renewable technologies and for affordable electric vehicles. So we actually kind of pivoted in many ways, and the last year or so of our company has been massively focused on scaling. How do we ramp production faster? How do we get more cars to more people? Because it doesn't help us to try and more aggressively sell a Model 3 if we can't build more than several hundred thousand per year. So everything right now is very focused on getting more production to happen faster. And we're also not stopping with cars. Our product roadmap for vehicles extends even beyond cars. And it may not be intuitive to everyone, but the same technology that's in a Model S can keep scaling up. In fact, you can just kind of double it, you can double it again. You can scale this to vehicles that are much bigger. Trucks, semis in fact. So we did some interesting modeling in the company several years ago now on what would happen if we did just keep scaling it up? How would the economics look? How would the performance look? And it was extremely compelling. So, what we've talked about and what's happening this September is we're actually unveiling, a whole new vehicle category, which is a Tesla semi. And to me, this is really neat because it's the amount of impact that we can have on pollution and on fuel usage and CO2 in the trucking sector is very disproportionate. One truck is driven a very large number of miles. People try and economically keep that truck in operation as much of the day as they possibly can. Whereas a passenger car, you might only drive a few percent of the time. So one truck offsets as much petroleum as a large number of cars. It's not just sort of a direct scaling based on size. It's actually a big multiple because they get used about 10 times more. So I'm pretty excited about this. I think it's going to be a phenomenal product that people will get to learn a lot more about in September. And one thing in common, one thing in common with all these products, though, it's probably maybe obvious, is that they all are going to need a lot of batteries. And anytime you're looking at scaling something that's kind of new to the world, it's important to look at the sort of scaling constraints. What will you run out of first if you kind of make 10 times more of it, or 100 times, or 1,000 times more of it? And batteries tend to be the one thing that needs a lot of attention. The lithium-ion battery industry is fairly mature, for electronics and most of the cell phones everyone's carrying. But that's what's driven the industry up until perhaps around this year, maybe last year. And going forward, the transportation market is going to start to drive that industry. And in fact, if you look at just the Model 3, not even including the Semi or any of our stationary storage projects, the Model 3 alone, when it's at maybe 500,000 vehicles per year, would use basically the entire world's output of lithium-ion battery supply. So clearly that doesn't scale. And we saw that coming several years ago, and we launched a project into manufacturing called the Gigafactory. So this is a pretty bold and kind of crazy initiative that we realized was necessary. We didn't really have much of a choice. We would have to do something like this in order to keep scaling as fast as we're going to with Model 3 and with trucks and everything else. But this Gigafactory was designed to have 50 gigawatt hours of battery pack output capacity. That's kind of why the name. And a gigawatt hour is sort of a bizarre metric. It's hard to really compute what that means. But this actually, to put it in more simple scale, this will actually be one of the biggest factories, if not the biggest factory in the world, when it's fully complete. And that's the kind of scope we're talking about to industrialize this new technology. And our goal is to have this be a net zero energy facility. So we're trying to really practice what we preach and build this in a very unique and innovative way. One kind of amazing thing we did is we had no fossil fuels at that entire factory. This is like by far the biggest factory that's ever been built that has no natural gas in it. Not all of the contractors were clapping when we had decided to do that. But, you know, in the end, it's actually saving us quite a bit of money. And it would be an interesting case study to focus on more. But by not even, you know, we just don't even have natural gas supply at this entire pad. So by doing that, you save all the money in permitting, you save the money in, you know, all the distribution of natural gas, and everything's electric. So all of our heating is with heat pumps, all of the cooling is with, you know, heat pumps. We've coupled those together in ways to harvest waste heat and waste cool. And it's really forced a lot of creative thinking at the building and facility level. So this is where we're at today with this project. It's still got a little ways to go, but we're starting production for Model 3 cells, you know, actually right now. So that we're starting to ramp up those cell manufacturing lines and crank this up as we begin to ramp Model 3. And one other thing that this factory has done, and part of our goal for doing this, was to reduce the cost of the batteries faster. Because if there's one thing that has leverage on making a more affordable EV, it's getting lower cost energy storage. You know, that is the most critical part that has the most leverage. So this was a big challenge for us, solving the supply chain issues of getting more batteries, but we kind of turned it into also an opportunity. Where if we were driving the whole world's scale of lithium-ion batteries, we could also drive the innovation, we could drive down prices faster than the market would otherwise do. And we're doing very different types of production than are done with laptop computers or cell phones because the scale is so much bigger. So this has allowed us to reduce the cost of the batteries faster than most people ever predicted and make cars like the Model 3, you know, possible at cost and price points that are lower than people were ever predicting. And another shift that we realized was possible with this was that we could take those same batteries and start to extend them into even other markets beyond vehicles. And we started thinking about this way back when we were looking into infrastructure and supercharging, but if you just take an electric vehicle as a single product, you know, it's an enabler for sustainability, but you really need to couple it with the correct energy generation sources, with renewable generation to make it truly sustainable. You know, that was a great intro to kind of highlight that with EV plus EV. And that is the way to really get to zero CO2 and to have something that uses no fossil fuels. So we didn't want to just sort of stop at the vehicle. We want to spend, you know, some of our time, and we wanted to, you know, use our connection to the customers in the market, you know, to start to advance generation as well. So, you know, last year Tesla acquired Solar City, which was the largest and, you know, is now integrated to Tesla, but it was the largest residential and rooftop solar installer in the country. And, you know, now we're integrating that completely into Tesla. And, you know, starting to offer those same solar products in our stores, selling them alongside the vehicles and offering it to our customers so that, you know, ultimately people who can buy an electric car can just, you know, more or less check the boxes to get the generation that will power that entire car. You know, it really should be that easy. You know, right now, it takes, you know, a lot more passion, it takes more commitment and dedication, and you almost need an engineering degree to figure out what type of, you know, solar you need, where you have to put it, you know, how do you connect it all together. But to make this mainstream and to make millions of people adopt it, you know, we want to make it incredibly simple so that it can just be part of buying your vehicle. It's just, you know, a simple extension of that same process. And the one additional piece to this is how do you store that? Because even if you have solar on your roof in your house and you have an electric vehicle, you know, the overlap when you actually want to be charging the car and when the sun is, you know, generating energy is not always that ideal. So in some places you can rely on the grid and you can net meter or you can send the solar energy to the grid and pull it out later. But, you know, that's not the best technical solution. And to really solve this completely, you know, you need to add storage. And if you add an element of storage, you can store your own solar power and then use it directly into your vehicle to charge it or in your whole house. So Tesla launched into this, and we started a product we call the Powerwall 2 years ago, and, you know, we've now iterated this even to the second generation of this product, and, you know, the rollout of this is going really well. This is a residential energy storage product that, you know, can go into someone's garage or outside their house and, you know, store energy in the same way and with the same technology that the batteries in your car, you know, store energy to move the car. This stores energy for your house. And, you know, our end goal here is to link it up with solar power in a distributed fashion and to link that up with storage and people's cars, so that they have an energy ecosystem that all works together. These are a few pictures of power walls. This one's actually in Australia in a family that we installed there. In certain parts of the world, this is more economic sooner because of utilities that have unfavorable rate structures where they don't pay you for solar energy, for excess solar energy. There's actually a lot of the world where that's the case, and it makes it very difficult to install solar. So storage in that case is a key enabler to making solar happen. And also, with the Solar City acquisition, a whole other product we're launching is something we call the solar roof. Because one of the limits today with installing solar on most houses is that you're trying to retrofit, more or less industrial solar panels on top of a residential roof. And, it may not be the most beautiful thing, and it frankly may not really be that feasible if the roof isn't the right shape or size. You just can't get very much generation. So what we're trying to do is build a product that is the roof. We don't want to have a roof with then a retrofit of some solar on top of it. We want to integrate the roof, the solar, the waterproofing, all of it into one system. And that's what Solar Roof does. So we've basically created glass solar modules that mount onto the roof and that create the ceiling and the weatherproofing all in one system. So this product is ramping up right now. We launched orders for this, and we're kind of going through the same process we did with the Roadster and with Model 3, ramping production and getting customer interest. But it's a really quite exciting product that I think will make it much easier for many more houses to end up having solar. There's many different styles of this type of roof. And I think this is going to be one of the keys, because ultimately, when you drive around the neighborhood, ideally the future we'd like to see is that every single car is an electric vehicle, whether we make it or not, and that every roof has some kind of solar generation on it. That would just be a kind of logical future that would solve quite cleanly the sustainability problem. And maybe just one example of how some of this is getting integrated today is to look at what we're doing in our application, our phone application that we give to our customers. Not many people get to experience this because you may not have the products yet, but it's really a neat way to see how all these things work together. You have your storage and your solar kind of right there linked with your car. So you can see how much state of charge your home battery has. You can look at power flows. This was actually from my house just a few days ago. You can look at how much solar generation is happening. You can look at what your demand is in your house at a given time and where that energy is going. And I'm sort of a little biased and a fun early adopter here, but it's this house has enough storage such that it never exports to the grid. It is grid connected, but it doesn't need to be. It's more of a backup. And that's, I think, a way that we can scale solar all the way to 100% of the grid. You don't have to get into debates about what is the impact on the utility, what is the impact on infrastructure. If we build systems like this, there is no impact. You're basically just reducing the demand on the overall utility while giving people the ability to use their own solar. So some of these graphs show you your load consumption, solar generation. You can see what the power wall is doing. This is kind of more for like the top 5% of nerdy customers, but you can really dig in. You can go super deep and learn a lot about how all this is working. And these storage solutions are also scaling out to commercial and industrial customers. So we have a whole line of batteries now that we're trying to sell and install for small businesses and industries. Because we've realized that batteries are cheap enough now that we can actually sell these to customers so they can save money on their peak electricity bills. If they don't even have solar, they can still save money and they can still have a huge positive benefit on the grid by not running some of the most dirty generation. Peaker plants that are very inefficient and very dirty. If we can install these batteries so that they consume battery power during the peak demand periods and then charge them up slowly at night, it both saves them money and it also makes the grid a lot cleaner. And the other really nice benefit is that this gives complete backup power. So some companies are already installing backup generators. It's a fairly common thing, to have backup power in an outage of utility. But this is a way that you can get backup power without any fuel, without any emissions, without any noise, and it can also save that money on peak generation. So it's an interesting way to sort of kill 2 or 3 birds with one stone. And in addition to these kind of commercial sites, what we're also very excited about is scaling this up even further. To utility scale systems where we're working on central type of plants that can power whole cities or whole communities. And I have a really short video that can explain this in way more influential terms than I can. But it's a beautiful installation that we've done on Hawaii, on the island of Kauai in Hawaii. And this is a battery pack, a very big battery pack, and a big solar array that's powering at its peak, about 20 or 30% of the entire island. So it's really amazing how this stuff is scaling, how fast it's growing. Maybe we can turn the sound up. Perfect. That one is so photogenic. It's like a project that was made for an advertising video, but it really is a gorgeous project, and it's doing amazing things on that island. The only way that they get electricity, other than renewables on Hawaii, is burning imported petroleum. It's amazing to me that they do that, but it sets electricity rates at an incredible high rate, and there's no way for them to add more renewables without adding storage. They've already added so much solar that they can't really go any further without storage. So ultimately, our goal here is to go not just to 20% or 30%, but ultimately we have to get to 100% renewable energy. Okay, let's see guys. It's kind of crazy to me that even hear some of our most aggressive forward climate plans and goals that reduce back by 10, 20, 30, 40%. Because to get to a stable CO2 level and actually turn it around and start coming back to where it was before we started polluting it, we need to basically go to 100% renewable. So it's interesting to just sort of take a little case study and look at what did that take in the U.S. What area of solar, if you just did solar, would it take to power the entire U.S.? And this is actually calculated for all cars, all heating, no natural gas for heating, no petroleum or no gasoline or diesel, and all electricity. So eliminating all fossil fuels from the U.S., that's about how much it would take. And of course we wouldn't build one giant, red square in, I'm not sure where that is, maybe it's like Kansas. But this would be distributed all over, on rooftops, on desert land that can't really be used for other purposes. And if you compare this to farming, I think that's an interesting comparison to me. If you said, well, hey, that's how much land it would take to feed all the people in the country, you would say, okay, that looks pretty reasonable. We actually have a lot more farmland dedicated to that. That works really productively, and it feeds everybody in the country and beyond. So to me, it seems like an incredibly doable challenge to say we have more than enough land, more land that's not even usable, that could power all of the stuff that we do, every single piece of it, without any CO2. So that to me is really the awesome future that we're going after. Is how do we create the products that can enable this and make it happen even faster? And this is also even relevant to places that don't even have infrastructure. The US is so built up, we have so much consumption per capita, but in massive parts of the world, there's over 1 billion people that don't even have electricity. And they're in the process of completely leapfrogging the way that we've done this. Just like cell phone adoption has leapfrogged landline build-out or all the other infrastructure such as that in parts of Africa and India, energy infrastructure is going to completely bypass big central coal power plants and huge high voltage transmission lines in favor of a distributed, decentralized architecture. And it's actually going to be cheaper and more robust. So this is where we're seeing incredibly exciting adoption and enablement in parts of the world that don't even have electricity, because this lets them have that benefit without the burden, without the giant decision-making process of building what we have today. So overall, I'll just kind of close with this quote that I really like, which is from actually the former Saudi oil minister of all people. But I think it was kind of quiescent when he was realizing that actually we're not going to run out of oil, and it's a good thing, because if we burned all the oil we have, it would be an environmental disaster. But we're not going to run out of it. We're not going to stop burning it because there isn't enough of it. We're going to stop burning fossil fuels because the products and the technology is innovating so quickly that it will make better products that are more compelling that people want to buy. Just like the Stone Age, people stopped using stone tools when we had metal. And the same thing is going to happen with energy in all its different forms, in trucks and cars and in houses and solar and wind and everything else. So this is the future I'm really super excited about. This is the future that at Tesla really drives us at the core. It's why so many people come to work with us and work so hard so many hours a day, is to try and realize this future. So thank you guys for your attention. I really appreciate it.